Yeah? Well, you know, I'm
所以我觉得就是抬高我的身价哦，哇，你看，他主要这个是校长啊，他亲自来迎接我啊，我们4个人一起去吃午饭。
I kind of just see like a V shape here, but I don't. I lose the legs. I guess.
It's just amazing.
It's woven. Yeah. What do you got for like a total of like $10? Because I forgot to ring one up and how much it's broken in. Right, that's food. Grads have to go to free food bank. My fiance. We're getting married next month.
It's really very nice. 1894.
1894.
Okay, but
Many people asked me who the pictures of the baby was. They asked if it was Lena, and I don't think people read labels because it says over here that the little girl is me, circa 1950. But I was reading this in a book, I don't know, some story about Chinese women in China, and it said a virtuous woman has no learning. And I went to Alice Wong, and I asked her if this was a common saying, and she said, oh yes, and she rattled it off, and I can't read it to you because I can't read Chinese. But she said there's a corollary to it, which is, okay, so this is a virtuous woman has no learning. The corollary is a talented woman has no virtue. And so I sent these two phrases to Deling Wang, who, did you study calligraphy with her?
I sat in on her class, yeah.
Because she taught calligraphy, Chinese calligraphy, as a cross-listed course between Chinese and art and design, and her classroom was right next to mine. That's how I met her.
That's cool.
Anyway, so I sent these two off to her, and she didn't like either of them, and so she made this third one up, which says, to be a woman is to possess both virtue and intelligence. And you can see how she's calligraphed this, and she made this very frail, a virtuous woman has no talent. And then she made this one very bold, right? A talented woman has no virtue. Both women, though, are caught in their car seats, still victims. And Dilling's, to be a woman is to possess both virtue and intelligence. And you notice she's in her own vehicle and in control. That's my piece. This one is also based on a Chinese saying that a woman really never has a name. So when she's a child, she's referred to as her father's daughter. And when she gets married, she becomes her husband's wife. So she doesn't have a name. She's referred to as so-and-so's wife. And after her husband dies, then she's referred to as her son's mother. And so that's what these Chinese words say in there. Let's see, I have translation. At home, submit to your father. And the next one, leaving home, submit to your husband. Oh, the three submissions of the virtuous Chinese wife. And the third one, when your husband dies, submit to your son. And so what I did was I put 5 words in red that represent the dismissiveness of who women were. They're non-entities, they're unknown, they're irrelevant, they're no one, they're invisible. And then 5 words where they have some significance. So primary, superior, regarded, important, confident, and so on. Each one of them has, so that's what the word list is there. these 5 panels represent my family's diaspora from China. So this was the first generation to emigrate from southern China, Canton province, to the Sandalwood Mountains, otherwise known as Hawaii. And that happened, I don't have a date, 1880s, early 1880s, something like that. We think that they came under the auspices of a Christian missionary, because my great-grandfather was one of the founding fathers of the first Chinese Christian church in Honolulu. Anyway, so this is my grandmother, and she was born in the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1886, and she had bound feet, 3 inches long. My mother, also born in Hawaii, but this time it's the territory of Hawaii. 4th panel is me. I was also born in the territory of Hawaii. And then my daughter, born in Indiana state of India. But the Chinese words are written in seal script. Seal script is a script that people use to mark their precious possessions, like paintings, and in this case, women. They are the 4 virtues of the virtuous woman. Is that right? Yes. The first one is virtue, and I'm not sure what virtue means, but it probably means that the woman is chaste. It doesn't matter about the husband, just the wife. The second one is propriety in speech, which means, to me, always say yes to your Lord and Master. The third one is physical appearance, so you have to be an asset to your husband and always be beautiful. The 4th one is diligence in housework, cooking and sewing. Not necessarily because you would do these things, because obviously you would have a wealthy husband, but you had to know how to do these so that you could order your servants around. And then Alice came up with this last one, which has nothing to do with these 4 virtues, and it means the accomplished young woman who has her, what did I write? The womanly accomplishment represents the 5th and succeeding generations of women who have the wisdom, confidence, and sovereignty to define their own lives within and outside the bounds of marriage. 4 mothers and 4 fathers are there as a pair. It's spelled F-O-U-R, and I don't actually, this doesn't say 4 mothers, I'm sorry, it says 4 bearers, referring to the fact that women are the bearers of generations. But this is a photograph of my mother's family and my husband's mother's family merged together. They were both taken at the end of World War II. Some of the men are still dressed in their U.S. Armed Forces uniforms. My father in the U.S. Army, my uncle in the U.S. Navy, my husband's grand uncle, quartermaster in the U.S. Army. So it just is to show that although I get all kinds of questions about how I met my husband in the war or why I speak English so well, I've been in this country at least as long as my husband's family has. 4 Fathers is the first piece that I wove in this series. It started because when I met my husband and I went to his family home, they started dragging out all their family pictures, and they dragged out a photograph of my husband's father and grandfather, and there was another, the rest of the picture had his grandmother and an aunt in it, and I said, I have a photograph like that. I have another photograph, which is my father and my grandfather, and when I researched it, I found out that my photograph was taken around 1925 in Honolulu, and this picture was taken in about the same time in Chicago. my father-in-law always referred to me as his son's exotic wife. But my father was born in Honolulu, the territory of Hawaii, in 1915. My grandfather emigrated to the Kingdom of Hawaii in the late 1880s, I think. My father-in-law was born after my father in 1818, and his father emigrated from Sweden in 1916. So it begs the question, which family is more American? Who's the more exotic one? My grandfather was a tailor, and so he made my father's midi suit. He also smoked cigars. And I'm now writing a story about this person here, who is my father's mother, a woman I never met. She died when she was 41, when my father was about 20. I have only recently learned that when she was 8 years old, she was shipped to China and essentially sold to a family because she had American citizenship. And so a Chinese family could buy American citizenship for one of their sons by marrying my grandmother and then coming back to Honolulu. But that never happened. And so she ended up coming back to Hawaii and marrying my grandfather. Kathy asked the question, how do I indicate this, there's color added in the anchor and in the midi here, the cigar and the shoes. And if I lift that up, you can see that there's color added here and a little bit there and so on. Oh, and the cigar over here. So, first of all, it's all in the programming. And it lifts up the threads to weave the black and white. And when so a black and white shed comes up and then it drops. And then a little tiny shed here opens up, just these threads. And you're supposed to throw, it says, and I've said light brown here, and then they weave that. And then a black and white shed opens and they throw the shed and then, and so it mimics actually how you would do it if you were doing brocade by hand. That's what you would do. You just open the whole shed, and then just a little one. The whole shed, and then just a little one. The difference between brocade and embroidery, this color is brocaded in there, is it's an embellishment of the fabric as it's being woven, as opposed to embroidery, which is embellishment of the fabric after the fabric is woven. So this brocading color goes in thread by thread as the fabric is being woven.
Your signature with the,
Right,
you
with,
said.
with the date and then my chop down here. But I designed this piece specifically so that it could be seen from both sides, because every story has at least two sides to it. So the day after my husband and I were married, we were in church, in his parents' family's church, and the woman sitting next to me on the pew asked me, "Did you meet your husband in the war?" And I thought, war? What war? And then I thought, skiff? In the war? And then I thought, oh my God, she thinks I'm a war bride, right? So I've written about 5 or 6 stories now about how I met my husband in the war, and they all center around this photograph, which is my niece inside a submarine looking through the periscope. And one of the stories says that yes, I did meet my husband in the war. I was the captain of the Chinese Navy, and I was doing reconnaissance in the Baltic, and this is our periscope inside our ship, and I was looking around, and I saw this Swedish fisherman, and so I surfaced and threw open the hatch and grabbed him. And then we took our submarine, we went across the Atlantic Ocean and up the St. Lawrence Seaway and down into Lake Michigan, and I know that you think that that's a U-505 German sub, but it's actually my submarine in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Do you believe me? Both of these pieces are based on letters that my father wrote to me when I was growing up. And Dad would take these legal size yellow writing pads and write in all capital letters with a red wax pen, or sometimes a very heavy number 4 lead pencil, these letters. And then he would give them to my mother, and she would type them up, and they would be sent to the 3 of us in triplicate. So she typed them up in triplicate. This is when they didn't have computers, so you had to type it up and have all these carbon copies. Anyway, so the person who the letter was addressed to would get the original, and the 2 other siblings would get the copies. So I have all my dad's letters to us. I understand from the grandchildren that they also got similar letters about choosing the best spouse to get the best quality offspring. And so this is just a quotation straight from my father. I firmly believe in prudent and realistic planning in obtaining the best quality of offspring. Scientifically, it is done in racehorses, cattle, and in agriculture most successfully. The royal and elite families do not leave this to chance. And so my father's prescription to me for the ideal husband was Chinese and a Harvard graduate. And my mother had a different set of criteria. When I turned 30, she said, "What do you want for Christmas besides something tall, dark, and handsome?" And then she added, "Your problem is you want someone who is both artistic and intelligent. You can't have everything." So by the time I turned 32, and I still wasn't married, my parents were at the point where they didn't care what I married as long as I got married. But I did manage to meet most of my parents' criteria in a husband. He's not Chinese and he's not dark, but he's tall and handsome and intelligent and an artist, and a Harvard graduate. Improbable as that combination of characteristics may seem. I also, these are photographs of my husband, I also married into cattle and agriculture as my father recommended. So this is the piece about the starving artist. I was in my, sophomore year of college, and I wasn't allowed to major in art, so I was trying out English and things like that. And I really wanted to study art, and my father wrote me this letter. And it said, "Your trouble is you're toying and dabbling in art. Choose a sound, serious vocation, and get your teeth into it." It doesn't say that, but this is what he wrote. "Get your teeth into it, the sound and serious vocation." So years later, it occurred to me that I could make 2 pieces, a diptych, as it were, sort of a play on words of my father. So pop art and Dada. So this is a parody of Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein using Chairman Mao, the dot screens of Roy Lichtenstein, to represent the first half of the saying, pop art, my father-inspired art. And then taking Dada artist Marcel Duchamp. Somebody last night said, "Why is there a mustache on Mona Lisa?" And then if you look closely, you can actually see the goatee that he scratched in there. I'd forgotten that it came out so well. Originally I was thinking that I would embroider it, but it's just woven in there. It's very subtle. So taking Marcel Duchamp and Barbara Kruger, both, she's more of a pop artist, but to make this statement of pop art and Dada. So what I wrote here was, few parents want their child to major in art, needlessly worrying that their progeny will not be able to clothe, feed, and shelter themselves and their future families. They point to the lives of starving artists such as Vincent van Gogh and the countless others who weren't even recognized, not even after they died. And this parental anxiety is not just a Chinese anxiety. I think it goes across cultures and across time. Nevertheless, I did major in art, and I've not gone hungry. This is the only piece that I lined because the
Were you afraid it would get snagged?
yeah, all those threads would get snagged and it
Yeah.
would be pulled. Yeah. I think that, so this was somebody else had woven this. If I had woven it, I would have probably switched shuttles. But, when you're asking somebody else to do it, you don't have that kind of choice. They're not going to work that hard to make the back look nice. That's Toby in his car seat. And Lana in her pink tennis shoes. I was fooling around with this, so I was just sort of, picking up the little colored balloons in his shirt and the little, these were probably appliques on her dress, but I just wanted to fool with that. But I've brocaded around the edge various somewhat derogatory terms that children of mixed blood are called. Halvesy, hybrid vigor, banana, multi-culti, Colby Jack, mutt, American mixed, biracial, Hapa Haole, which is Hawaiian, Eurasian, Twinkie, yellow on the outside, white on the inside, half-breed, Asian American, interracial. Anyway, this is called hybrid vigor because Dad, my father-in-law, had a different idea about best breeding practices. He said, our children were so bright and beautiful because they are the result of hybrid vigor.